stories from around the corner
and around the country.
You're listening to All the Best.
Proudly supported by the Art Gallery of New South Wales.
Before we get into this week's stories, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge that I'm recording from stolen and Gadigal land and pay my respect to Gadigal elders past and present, and also recognize that the area where FBI Radio is situated, Redfern, has long been a place of storytelling, strength, resistance, and resilience for First Nations communities. You're listening to All the Best from FBI Radio 94.5. I'm Kwame Slusher. I've spent most of my childhood on beaches, making chaotic sandcastles, digging holes, just spending time with family and friends. So now, even though I live thousands of miles from the different places I've called home, sometimes just hearing the cadence of waves lapping against the shore can help me feel connected to some of those places and memories. In this episode, we have 3 stories about connection. Connection to the land and the sea, connection to history, connection to the divine, and to ourselves. In our first story, Shareeka reconnects to faith and identity through the voice of the singer Sheila Chandra.
I often think about how my first relationship to sound was hearing an azan or a bhajan. Vocalizations that try to bring one closer to God. My parents insisted on an interfaith marriage, despite historical contexts of rupture and the beckoning of their family members not to. They got married at the only temple that would acknowledge their love, a roadside Murugan temple off the interstate highway in Coimbatore, India. I grew up surrounded by songs of worship. Islamic recitations and Hindu chants drenched our inner city flat. There was always something playing. Mohammed Rafi, ghazals, Mariah Carey, Bengali folk music, Bollywood soundtracks, the greatest hits of Ustad Zakir Hussain. Eventually, these sounds became a low hum in the background amid fighting and dysfunction. I soon abandoned them for punk archives and 2000s R&B. I continued to visit the masjid and temples, but quietly I had abandoned any practice of faith, unknowing how to separate devotion from dogma. But there was one voice that always pierced through.
I suppose my first experience of singing is really how natural and essential it was for me to make that kind of a noise.
The poet Kazim Ali writes of the voice of Sheila Chandra. Who can syllables like Sheila Chandra moan us? Covered in a blanket of sound, carried cacophony, smoke a voice hits all the notes at once, devotional or pop or drone, same. I'd hold my ears against my parents' all-in-one FM tape and CD player, as though my body could dive into the binaural microtone resonances. I didn't know what the technical words were at the time. I just knew I wanted to be in this sound world, to understand the notes between notes, and why her voice made me feel like there was something specific and clear in the infinite and chaotic. When I didn't want to be in this world, I wanted to be in hers. Tethered, I felt like her vocals found me, enmeshed in her drones.
Particularly special about drone musics in that they have some kind of mechanism within the actual musical structure which enables them to transport people really, really easily, gives them that transcendent experience that they want. And the performer, I mean, ideally the performer is being transported and brings the audience along with them.
Her voice wove between genre and vocal stylizations that were familiar and dissonant all at once. I guess some people would call it fusion or world music, the colonial urge to render things into narrow categories.
I didn't really have those mental delineating borders. It was easier for me to hear technically how various genres of music, they connected. Because, you know, structurally we're using the same things. We're using chords, or we're using drones, or we're using the same 12 semitones.
A few years ago, I was unexpectedly living alone. I'd go days without talking to people, and time would collapse in on itself. I had returned to Sheila Chandra's work, in its layers of reverberation and its layers of histories, like a sense of echo and sustenance and no sense of structure and return. A familiar blanket of sound, devotional or pop or drone, same.
And in a way, we've been robbed of our instinctual songs, partly because in the West, we've forgotten the tribal traditions that we've come from. I mean, that is a condition of whiteness, to forget that in order to take on the mentality of the colonizer, which is a loss for so many peoples who seek provenance almost through materialism. But I think we've also lost our ancient connection to singing our own songs and vocalizing our own experience, because we no longer in the West grow up singing. So we become very detached from our voices very, very early on. A child will babble and sing and has absolutely no self-consciousness about that. But as we grow beyond the age of nursery rhymes, really, we stop using our voices and they fall into this very rusty condition as far as singing is concerned, and we lose confidence.
I felt disconnected from the world around me. I felt disconnected from my sense of self. Or maybe, in Sheila's words, I felt disconnected from my instinctual song.
When you're a vocalist, it feels as though you have access to a world heritage of vocal culture. Because voice is the only instrument that we know has not changed across thousands of years. And we can't say the same of instruments. And so there is this sense that all music that's been written for the voice is open for you to explore. And I wonder if there actually was a network of memory threads connecting various vocal traditions which had just become obscured and lost from human memory, which is really quite short, unless we take care to preserve traditions. Singers, in a way, we're vessels. We are inhabited by songs and inhabited by the techniques, and I discovered what I felt were vocal gateways that had been left there that were still open, that were crumbling, that were open for me to walk through again. Because it felt like it was just waiting there for me to walk those routes. And it only took a singer who was interested in all those vocal cultures to be able to see the paths.
I took up Carnatic singing lessons. Perhaps I thought I could also use my voice to move through a crumbling gateway of vocal tradition. But mostly I wanted to find some solace in my own voice and affirm my own existence. I sit across from my teacher, mirroring notes. Her voice is full-bellied and confident. I'm hesitant and out of breath, but learning. After my first singing lesson, I couldn't stop crying. A return to body, a return to voice, a return to spirit. A practice that I had denied for so long lived within me, unravelled by another person.
The human voice, it's literally the instrument all of us have under our noses. And in fact, we all do use our voices as instruments when we're in states of extreme emotion. We can scream, we can wail, we can sob. Well, they're guttural and visceral, they're instinctive. They're much closer to music in terms of human expression. They're not stylized, but they are the basis on which stylized vocal has been taken on and developed to produce song and to produce evocative sound.
There was an album of Sheila Chandra I'd always return to. It was called Weaving My Ancestors' Voices. A vocal feat that defied time and tradition and defied transcription. Still, I tried to mirror her voice too.
For me, the actual experience of singing is, I suppose, what one could call a transcendent experience. And I think that's what the audience come for. They come to be transported. I think what a performer does when they're on stage is kind of share their musical brain with the audience. And so it gives the audience greater, while they're listening in that live setting, gives the audience greater insight into the musicality than maybe their own level of musical understanding extends to in ordinary life.
Din ta kita din din kita.
I think the transportation and the magic, the mechanism to transport a human mind was in the music in the beginning. And what happened was that various religions have decided to utilize that in various ways. And those are where the vocal gateways appear.
Speaking in tongues is when someone can commune with the divine. The voice transcends, moving beyond the plane we know to spiritually connect elsewhere. When I listen to Sheila Chandra speaking in tongues, her voice threads across time, weaving ancestral voices. Voice and tongue and breath braid together, becoming muscle and shape and sound and memory. Sheila Chandra doesn't sing anymore, losing her ability when her vocal cords were scarred. Despite the pain, she does speak sometimes to ensure that her vocal mechanism does not atrophy, but her songs remain.
My music was made in service of other people. So I don't have an agenda about, what they take from it, whether they come back to it, whether they forget it. It was a moment in time where I was at my physical peak vocally and able to make kind of music that it was absolutely imperative for me to make as a musician. I suppose I would always point people back to the richness of voice and towards traditions that are drone-based, because drone-based traditions put the most responsibility on the voice to carry the emotion. You don't have the support of chords changing underneath to put a different emotional colour on the note you're singing. So I would be honoured to be remembered as someone who carried the vocal tradition for my time and pointed others to keep carrying it and exploring it.
When I am alone in an open space, any space, I make my breathing as audible as possible. I turn it into a low hum, letting drone sounds vibrate as free and wobbly as can be, relinquishing any perfectionism. If I practice for long enough, it's the most in tune I feel with myself and others, and I'm reminded how connection can be a remedy to the harshness of this world. I breathe in and out. I drop in from my thinking self to my feeling self. I notice all the sensations that live in this body. I imagine my head guided upwards, taking a full breath and expanding into the heavens. I often think about how my first relationship to sound was hearing an azan or a bhajan, vocalizations that try to bring one closer to God. I look up. And spell God's name with my tongue.
That story was produced by Shareeka Helaluddin. The supervising producer was Mel Chun. Our next stories are recordings from the Red Dirt Poetry Festival, an annual showcase of spoken word and poetry from Mparntwe, Central Australia. In the first story, Marie takes us into the very heart of the desert.
I am the black pearl of the desert. My ancient Arunda blood flows through my veins. I am the black pearl of the desert. Ancient stories of old, shared around the campfire. I am the black pearl of the desert. Sparks flickers to the sound of the storyteller. I am the black pearl of the desert. My heart beat fast with excitement. I am the black pearl of the desert. My heart calming to the rhythm of my heart beating. I am the black pearl of the desert. The pearl within shines brightly. I am the black pearl of the desert, precious, priceless, and adored. I am the black pearl of the desert.
That story was performed by Marie Elena Ellis, with music by Dan the Underdog. In the second story from the Red Dirt Poetry Festival, Melanie keeps us grounded with her piece titled Red Dirt.
Salt, sand, stars, soil. The aroma of salt drifts, sits on the skin of saltwater people, memories soaked in the water. The water remembers all. From the beginning of time, centuries turn like the tide. Salt playfully dances with the sand, a dance only they know by memory. They slow and hasten, roll with the water to the beat of the moon rays. Stars, their forever audience. And the earth shall birth them, grow them, nourish them, and bury them in ashes, in salt, in sand. Reeds, rocks, roots, rivers. Children of time, of places not born through the canal of this land, swim upstream, against tides, through brackish water, forceful strokes breaking through surfaces, carving unwanted paths, through ripples that were never free for the taking. Pull up roots that belong in this earth, as though obnoxious weeds refused to see the intricacies, the submerged webs weaved beneath the surface of tidal ebbs and flows. The water knows. The water remembers all. Clay, cinder, kin, culture. Continuing survival celebrated on innocent faces dons the colours of the earth. From dawn till now, the fire of beginning still ablaze, yet its bloodshed they celebrate. The poisoning of a pure way of life, making way for a culture of lies, draped in a disguise of a celebration of discovery. The morning of this dawn surges through bloodlines. Grandmother, mother, child, pain and pride, hand in hand, side by side. Rage, steel, wage, age. Flames rage through the body, a wildfire of pain radiating from the heart to the eyes. Brown boys ask why. Do you despise me? Replace native tongues with foreign nuns. Mine the gold from their grandfather's pockets. Keep children in your lockup. Tell their brother all lives matter, just not theirs. As they stare into a concrete abyss, yearning for their father's embrace, their mother's kiss, inhaling stolen childhood, exhaling false justice. Beat, bruise, bark, bait. Opals appear during fearful times. The swirl of blues and purples, only precious on stones. Not faces of loved ones who lay in shallow graves, dug by anger, buried by hate, or hang on dirty walls, or fall into eternal sleep beneath your knees on blood-stained streets. Their memories cast into the sea, a warning to the free that the system is thriving. Tears, tongue, voice, song. Resistance is a symphony. An orchestra of history, each era a different instrument, playing melodies of refusal to lay down and die. We sing survival, a song we know every word to, and our ancestors sing along with pride, for we are their wildest dreams come true. The strong and the sturdy grown from their roots, nourished by their tears, guided by their voice. And the earth shall birth us, grow us, nourish us, and bury us in ashes, in salt, in sand. The aroma of salt will drift, sit on the skin of saltwater people, memories soaking in the water. The water will remember all. From the beginning of time, when centuries turned like the tide, salt will playfully dance with the sand, a dance only they will know by memory. They will slow and hasten, roll with the water to the beat of the moon rays. Stars, their forever audience. On the soul.
That story was performed by Melanie Manunga, with music by J9 Stanton. Those pieces were performed and recorded at the Red Dirt Poetry Festival, a celebration of spoken word and poetry from Mparntwe, Central Australia. You can check them out over at their YouTube or at their website, reddirtpoetryfestival.com. Whether you're a storyteller or a story lover, tune in to new All the Best episodes each Tuesday at 4 p.m. You'll discover stories created by a host of independent audio makers from so-called Sydney and around the country. Make sure to hit follow or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. All the Best is made at FBI Radio on Gadigal land in association with SYN on Wurundjeri Woi Wurrung and Boon Wurrung lands and ACCC on Arrernte and Warramungu lands. The All the Best editorial producer is Mel Bakewell, and Phoebe Adler-Ryan is our executive producer. Patrick McKenzie is our community coordinator, and thanks to all the volunteers who help to bring you all the best each week. Shining Bird composed our theme music, and Annie Hamilton designed the artwork. We're heard across Australia on the Community Radio Network, and were made possible by the Art Gallery of New South Wales and the Community Broadcasting Foundation. You can find our full archive of more than 500 episodes at allthebestradio.com. I'm Kwame Slusher. Thanks for listening.